Hey guys, finally getting back on this again. I got the valves out of one of the cylinders. I'm gonna do these one cylinder at a time so I can keep track of things a little easier. But the valves don't look bad. The seats focus. Okay. The valves don't look bad. The seats look pretty good, but we're going to go ahead and focus. Come on. We're going to go ahead and touch them up while we're here. And part of this I want to kind of do as a test, grinding valves on the lathe, because eventually I need to do a valve job on the Oliver, and I kind of want to see if I can do it myself. But anyway, we're going to get the lathe set up and grind the valves. Okay, so I've got the lathe set up. We've got the tool post grinder back on. When we built that thing last winter, I sure never thought it would get used this much, but it's been very handy. So I've got my collet chucks set up on the lathe. These are 5/16 inch diameter valve stems, so I've got the appropriate collet in there, and I have dressed a 45-degree angle on this wheel, just on that corner. Initially I had thought that when I would try to grind valves I would have the whole grinder rotated on 45 degrees, but I didn't have enough reach, and then I thought, hey dummy, just dress an angle on the wheel. So, oh yeah, I can do that. So and get the camera set up somehow, and we'll see if we can grind this valve. Okay, so that's my intake valve. I think that finish came out pretty nice. So let's go see what we can do with the exhaust valve now. Okay, so this is our seat grinder set. My uncle actually bought this at an auction several years ago, and he bought it for the stones to go with his seat grinder, but he got it home and realized that because this is a different brand than what his is, the stones weren't compatible with his grinder, so he gave this one to us. And so this is, I don't know if you can read it, this is a, oh there it is, this is a Sioux brand, which I've always thought this, apparently I was thinking backwards. I always thought that this was a Black & Decker and that Uncle Tim had a Sioux, but apparently he has a Black & Decker and this one is a Sioux. So anyway, we got a few stones in there, pilot's stone dresser so you can get your angle right on your stone, and for your pilots, this is the end that your stone holder goes on, and then for each size, I don't think we have all of them, but for each size, so this is a 5/16 for a 5/16 valve guide, you've got standard, and then you've got plus 1,000, plus 2,000, plus 3,000 to account for wear in the guides. So this engine has 5/16 valve stems, and that fits down in there, and it still gets good and tight. And so it does have, they do have some wear out at this end, but a standard pilot still fits them pretty well. So the guides are still in decent enough shape to run. Okay, so got my pilot in, we've got our stone dressed. Just going to set it on here, and when you're doing this, you don't want to be pushing down on the driver with the motor. You just want it engaged and just enough to spin it. So this is, you're not putting extra pressure on it, you're just letting it spin and do the work on its own. And you don't want to go for very long, or else you grind way too much out. A little bit more. Okay. Okay, so there's just a quick look at the seat. It looks a little bit wider on this side than it does on this side. I'm okay with that. I will probably put a different angle cutter in to thin this one down a little bit on the top, but we'll check and see what it looks like against the valve before we grind any out of the seat. So now we'll move our pilot over into the exhaust hole, and we'll grind the 45 on that one. Plus one. See what that does. I think I like that better. Definitely need some more compress our stone a little bit. Okay, so I've got my 45-degree angle ground. It's not real even from one side to the other, but that's okay, we can straighten that out. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take just a Sharpie marker and I'm going to color the valves, or the surface of the valve with the marker. This is the intake valve. And we will drop that in and rotate it just a little bit. And by doing that, we can see, I don't know how well you can see where your seat surface is on the valve. You want it to be fairly centered. Usually if your seat is too far to the outside, then you'll want to grind it a little deeper, and then take a 60-degree angle stone and grind some off the top to narrow it up. This is a little higher than I'd like to see, but I don't know. I might take a little more off of this one. Okay, so I took a little bit more off of this one, not very much. So now we're going to change stones. I'm going to grind just a little bit off the top side of this. So this is the stone that I started with. This is a 45-degree angle stone. This one is a 60. So this is the stone you want to use for the top, for narrowing the seat on the top side. I think the bottom side looks, I don't think there's any issues down there. I don't think I need to grind anything off the bottom side of the seat, but I do want to take a little off the top side. So I think that's all the farther I want to go there. And that's how you create what the hot rodders all dream about, is a 3-angle valve job, because you've got your 60-degree on the top, your 45-degree where your seat is, and then usually a 30-degree down here below. So 3 angles. And now to finish up, just because this is the way I've always been shown to do it, we always finish up the job with a little bit of lapping compound, just to, I guess, give us a real good idea where our seats are at on the valves. And I don't know, I hate to use the phrase the way we've always done it, but that's the way we've always done it. Okay, so I've got, I don't know if you can see how well you can see that. That's the, or you see that darker spot there on the valve. That's where the lapping compound made its mark. So I'm happy with the I'm happy with the contact that I'm getting from the valves to the seats. So I'm about ready to put the cylinder back on the engine. Once the cylinder's back on, then I can adjust my valve clearance, or between the tip of the valve and the lifter. So since we've ground metal off the valve and off the seats, that's going to move the valve lower down into the head, or into the cylinder. So we're going to have to grind a little bit off the tip of the valve stem to get our valve clearance correct. So we'll get the cylinder back on and we'll continue from there. This is a little bit more awkward on these engines because if the piston is already on the connecting rod, then it has to go together from the bottom side instead of the top, so my regular piston ring compressor won't really work. And it's been a long time since I've messed with an engine like this, so I don't remember exactly how we did it before. Okay, so something else that's kind of interesting about these engines is that they don't really use gaskets in a lot of the normal places, or where you would expect to find a gasket. They use anaerobic gasket sealer. So we're going to put some of this on the surface and then put it together. This is the same stuff that's used between the two halves of the crankcase and on this outer cover. So once you get it up there, just put your nuts and your washers on and tighten everything up. Then we'll be ready to set our valve clearance. Okay, so we've got the cylinder on. I've got just the exhaust valve in it at the moment, and holding it up here, focus, come on. I can actually still get a 5/1000 feeler gauge in there right now, which I think is a little odd. I did not check where the valves were at before when I tore this down, so they may have been way too loose already. This engine had been apart before, but I never checked the valve clearance before. I'd kind of like it to be a little bit wider than 5, maybe like 6 or 7. I don't know. I'm finding different specs depending on where you look. I think Kohler actually specified 3 to 6, which seems very tight, but some of the other manufacturers, like the lawnmower manufacturers, recommended wider clearances, like 8 to 11, for the same engines. So, yeah, you just kind of decide what feels good and go with that in this case. Okay, I got the clearance set. I've got about 8 thousandths now on both valves. I ended up just basically hand grinding the tip of the valves because I wanted to put those back in the collet on the lathe and do them that way, but the head of the valve is too big to go through the collet holder. So I cave-manned it. I've done it that way before, and it works good enough for mower engines. But anyway, I'm not gonna video doing the other side because it's just a repeat of the same, and this is probably already way too long anyway. So if anybody's still watching, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope you all have a good one. Thanks again.